I've always been a person that has weird things happen to them. It's not a matter of if something is going to happen, it's when. Because of this, I've become pretty aloof when it comes to interacting with the world, maintaining a "it is what it is" mentality. However, I feel like I was justified in being freaked out about this incident in particular. Not a lot actually scares me, but this is one of the few things that did. The setting was a typical scary story setting, 1130-ish at night. Pitch dark outside, hardly anyone on the roads. I was freshly 18 and driving, on my way back from a 6-hour shift at work, and had pulled into a 24-hour fast food drive-through. I live out of town, and I knew I'd be too tired to make myself something once I got home. Plus, I was starving. Nothing out of the ordinary happened while I was getting my food. There was nobody else around, and me and the drive-through worker seemed to be the only ones currently awake. What I assumed was his car was the only one in the parking lot, and it was parked close to the employee exit entrance, which is almost right next to the exit of the drive-through. I get my food, bid the guy a good night, then pull into the nearest parking spot fresh out of the drive-through, which is literally right in front of it. Though there's enough space between it and the exit for a car to get by, I parked the car and began setting myself up for the drive home, unwrapping my wrap and putting my straw in my drink. The usual. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the headlights of a vehicle pull into the parking lot from the farthest entrance. The fast food restaurant shares a parking lot with a vacant building that used to be a Sears, and people are free to use that entrance as well. I pay it no mind, figuring someone else had the same idea as me, and go back to setting myself up. For a solid minute, I'm getting myself situated, before I suddenly get the feeling that I'm not alone. I look up in time to see the same vehicle pull up right next to my car, literally the next parking space over. Mind you, the parking lot is completely empty. They could have parked anywhere else. Yet they chose to pull up right next to my tiny little car, which felt more like an insect compared to the massive black truck they were in. In this moment, I jump into defensive mode and immediately start taking note of everything I can see about this truck. It's completely black. The back windows are tinted, but there's enough lighting that I can see the silhouettes of 2, maybe 3 passengers in the back seat. In the front seat is the driver, who is obscured by the darkness, and the passenger, whose door is almost snug up against my driver's door. He's tall and lanky, wearing a baseball hat and a face mask, one of the black paper ones, and has a hoodie on with the hood pulled up over his head and hat. For a few moments, I just sit there, staring, and the passenger of the truck is looking at me. I can feel it, and I'm majorly creeped and uncomfortable, yet frozen in place. The truck has pulled into park. I could hear the gear change, and saw the driver move accordingly. Me and the passenger just stared at one another through our windows. My brain was screaming at me to move, but I couldn't. My hand still in the process of unwrapping my food. I wasn't a pretty sight. My hair was slicked back with sweat into a ponytail. My shift had absolutely wiped the floor with me, and anyone could tell just by looking at me. And I was wearing my glasses that I use when I drive, nearsighted issues and astigmatism. The longer we Saturday there, the louder my brain kept screaming at me to move, to do something other than sit there and stare at this guy. I've been in enough situations where I know that my fear response, unfortunately, is to freeze. And that was exactly what I had done. That was until the passenger moved. Within a few seconds, a lot happened. The passenger moved and opened his door and began the process of getting out. My body finally kicked into gear right as I heard my brain audibly tell me, "Nope, go," and I listened. I yanked the car into drive and sped out of there, one hand still holding my wrap, the other gripping the steering wheel and swerving to get the fuck out of there. As I exited the parking lot, I looked back through the window and saw the passenger getting back into the truck. I didn't look long enough to see if they'd left or not, considering there was a traffic light coming up, but I'm assuming they did. I probably broke multiple speeding laws getting the hell out of there, but I didn't care. I immediately messaged my friend and told her what happened. I knew she'd be asleep, and then called my boyfriend at the time, who'd been waiting up for me so we could talk once I got off work. He picked up, and I told him what happened. He could tell I was serious because of the tone of my voice, and he asked if I was okay. I stayed on the phone with him the entire way back to my house, and kept looking over my shoulder, suspicious of any headlights that might be following me. Thankfully, Once I got off the highway and onto the back roads towards my house. I live on a farm. Nobody was following me. I bid my boyfriend good night once I turned off the car, got inside and ate my food, and immediately went to bed, too tired to stress over the situation any more than I already had. When I told my mom about it in the morning, she just said, "Yeah, he was trying to talk to you." Which, well, duh. She wasn't very sympathetic to my stress, for whatever reason. So I just brushed it off and continued with my day, and then my life. However, my friend that I had messaged the previous night freaked out enough for me and my mother, and she called me the second she woke up and saw my message to make sure I was okay. Even now, months later, she still mentions it whenever the topic comes up. And honestly, I'm grateful she cares as much as she does. My mom's reaction made me feel like I was overreacting, even though logically I knew I wasn't. Freeze is still my automatic fear response, and I'm doing everything I can to fix it. I'd rather not be put in that position again. The year was 1989 on the eastern end of Long Island. It was mid-July, a nice hot summer day, a perfect one to get out on the water. My dad had a 17-foot Mako fishing boat that we affectionately called the Mighty Mako. It had a 90 HP horsepower outboard engine called the Tower of Power. We have a lot of nicknames for things, I guess. But anyway, she was an inline six with a center console that had a small bench seat on the front, just big enough to hold a cooler and keep it out of the sun. There was a small hold in the V-berth that we stored our life preservers in, along with the anchor, and a rickety metal hand railing around the bow that probably could have used a few more screws to tighten it up, but it was still attached. We used to love to sit up there and hold on to it at cruising speed, screaming with laughter when our toes touched the water below. Lots of memories were made on that little boat, and lots of stories. Some stories I won't soon forget, and this is one of them. There are more, many more, but this one is the harrowing story of ⴘᴏᴜ. So, good old Wild Bill, that's my dad, took my older sister, Melissa, and I out that day with one of his younger brothers, Uncle Johnny. I was 7 years old, and my sister was just about to turn 10, respectively. It was just going to be a day trip for some fishing and fun. Maybe we'd even get to go swimming at Split Rock. If the tide was right, and it was sticking up out of the water enough for us to jump off of without getting cut up on the barnacles attached to the rocks below it. Then we'd head further out towards the Cedar Point Lighthouse for some bottom fishing near the breakwater. Fried fluke makes for a delicious meal, so we were all in good spirits and had high hopes for the day. It was going to be a good one. A few hours of fishing in the hot sun went by. The wind and tide started to change, making the conditions just about right for reeling in some big stripers out at the gut. My sister and I were, by now, getting bored of this spot, and were eager to feel some wind on our faces and cool off a bit as we cruised. So off we went. We headed farther out in the Long Island Sound, toward the ocean, toward Plum Island. I'm sure some of you might have heard tell of this animal research island owned by the government and off limits to the public, but that's another story. And Southold, the northern fork of Long Island. There, the land from the two islands comes together and squeezes all of the ocean water into the bay on an incoming tide and forms this rip of sea where the bottom goes from 300 feet deep to 30 feet in a relatively small space, creating some pretty big swells on top of the water. Mostly, bigger fishing vessels dared to fish there. The rip at ⴘᴜ made for some good feeding grounds for the bigger ocean-striped bass at certain times. Times like the changing of the tide on a hot, mid-July day, just like this day. Just about at this time, too. And, if we were lucky, we could make it out there with just enough of it to reel in a few big ones before dark, and still make it back into shore safely. At least, those were the intentions. The sea was calm on the way out, not glassy, but smooth with rolling waves, seemingly getting bigger and bigger as the wind picked up. We were enjoying the ride. The sun was high. It was hot out, and the spray from the bow of the boat cutting through the waves felt nice and refreshing. It was cooling off our sunburnt skin. We were laughing together and trying to hold on tight for the ride. But the weather can be known to change at the drop of a dime. Out at the gut, it is very unpredictable. It could be bright and sunny out one minute and the next go dark, gray, and stormy. And that is exactly what happened to us that fateful day. Sun-filled skies quickly turned ominously gray. Suddenly it got dark and the wind picked way up. The water quickly turned white-capped, and the waves got bigger and bigger. Our little boat was rocking in those waves as they grew, and the wind was now whipping. We were scared. My sister and I, we were ready to go home. A storm was on the horizon and seemed to be heading straight for us. It was about to hit, and hit hard. My dad knew it. After looking around and at the quickly changing sky, he looked at his brother and then down at us girls, and finally decided it was time to reel it up and head in. By now the rain was sideways and pelting our faces. The wind had picked up, and the sky went black until a bolt of lightning lit it up like a New Year's Eve celebration, making the sky look on fire and angry. We saw lightning strikes make contact with the water, which by this point very much resembled the water in a washing machine, and we were scared. We hadn't even really known the meaning of the word, scared, until now. Mel and I are crouched down behind the center console with our never-worn-before life preservers on, in between and holding on to my dad's and uncle's legs, who were holding onto the dashboard for dear life as our little boat steamed on, crashing through wave after wave, one immediately after the other, just crashing into us, head on. We thought the boat would surely sink, and we were going to drown out there. It felt like this went on for an eternity. We were now freezing, wet and shivering, holding on so tightly and filled with fear of getting washed overboard with the next big wave that hit. When that is exactly what happened. To me, it was cold, dark and loud, so loud. The boat sounded like it was cracking up. It sounded like breaking, like sinking. There was water everywhere, all around me. I was constantly holding my breath and then gasping air in when there was a 2-second lull between waves crashing into us. And there wasn't a wall of water surrounding me, threatening to drown me right there in that little boat. When all of a sudden I found myself weightless. Everything went quiet around me. Inside the cold, white water, I reached my little arms out for my dad, but had lost grip of his legs. I couldn't feel him anymore. I couldn't feel the warmth of him. And I was even more scared. Then, in the cold, quiet darkness, I felt my hand brush against metal amidst the icy water. It was the hand railing on the bow, and it was below me. I gripped onto it, somehow, with my left hand. My feet were extended up above my head in the water, almost vertically. And if I lost my grip of that rickety metal railing, I was surely a goner. I'd be washed away in a second. No longer. I'd be lost at sea, way out in the treacherous waters, in the rip of ⴡⴜ The next thing I knew, the water opened up around me, just enough for me to be able to take in a deep breath of air and open my eyes. It was still dark, but there, in front of my face, lit up by lightning, was a hand. It was my dad's huge hand, fingers spread wide and ready to grab with all their might. And behind his outstretched arm and hand was my dad's face, wide-eyed and panic-stricken, staring back at me with a look of pure devastation. He had left Johnny at the helm, Melissa still tucked down under him, between his legs, and now fully blocked behind the console, holding on and crying. I'm sure, stood firmly braced against the bench seat, with one arm outstretched and reaching for me while still holding onto the dashboard of the center console with the other, so as not to get washed overboard with me. And just as my tiny, wet and tired fingers were about to lose grip of that old railing, that rickety, old, loose and fabulous life-saving safety keeper of a railing, God bless it, he finally got a hold of some part of me, probably my life preserver, still serving, and as my life, short as it was then, was flashing before my eyes, he yanked me right out of the water and didn't let go until I was thoroughly tucked back under his knees, holding on to him in that tiny center console, in that relatively tiny boat in comparison to the surrounding seas, and yelled at us to hold on then and stay down. And I did. That might have been the first time in my life that I had actually listened and did exactly what I was told to do. Up until then. But I did exactly that. I held on and I stayed down as best I could. I cried and I prayed for what seemed like a very long time. As I got out of bed, I walked down the stairway and cooked me some breakfast. A mushroom omelet with a side of toast. It was the busiest time of the year. Parents doing last-minute shopping. Kids singing Christmas carols. People watching movies. All of that. I thought it was a good time to go camping since most people camp out during the warmer days. Plus, I had a glamping tent I hadn't used yet. When I finished eating breakfast, I grabbed a notepad and read what I needed to bring: 1-quart canteen, portable satellite, sleeping bag, glamping tent, portable wireless heater, laptop, chips and pancakes, lantern, and tent lock. After I got the last item off the list, I used the restroom before locking my house. When I got into the car, I headed to the nearest gas station. There I bought a bag of chips. As I was getting ready to check my items out, I saw a peculiar-looking old man. He had gray hair and a receding hairline. He looked as if he was in his 90s. He also had a red cashmere sweater and slim green cargo pants. From what I could tell, he had a crowbar and a black garbage bag in his hands. I stared at him, but got interrupted by the cashier's words of, "That will be 5 and C30. And would you like a receipt?" I handed her the cash and told her no before promptly exiting the store. As I was filling up my car with gas, I saw that same old man from the store, entering his rusty old blue pickup truck with the items he just bought in the store. I shrugged it off and put the gas pump back, and then proceeded to drive my car to the campground. I was getting close to the park after a few hours of driving. When I entered the park, I parked my car into the nearest parking space before grabbing my stuff from the back of my truck. I looked around and saw a toll booth and a bunch of other miscellaneous cars. As I walked towards the toll booth, I was greeted by the toll booth operator. I asked for the fee, and he said that it was free today. No wonder why there are so many cars, I thought to myself. From what I remember, the operator said, "Anyways, campsite 12 is still available. All you need to do is to walk straight until you come upon a fork in which you'll turn left, and continue walking left until you spot another trail intersecting with the road you're walking on. Go on that trail and it'll lead you to a vacant campsite." I thanked him as he pushed a button to open a gate into the forest. There I hiked towards my campsite. When I finished hiking towards my campsite, I saw a beautiful arrangement of trees, elegantly swaying in a back and forth motion, while an orange bright sky lay upon it. Perfect, I thought, as I admired the scenery upon me. I started to set up my tent. I swung it around to get some air inside my tent, then anchored the tent with the screws that came with it. After that, I set up my satellite and my internet. Next, I put the sleeping bag, lantern, laptop, and the portable heater inside too. I grabbed the snacks and put them inside of the tent. Now I was ready to camp. After I set up my campsite, it was already nighttime, so I got into my tent and locked it with my trusty tent lock. While I was sleeping, I felt thirsty, so I woke up and got up to grab my canteen. When I was drinking out of my canteen, I suddenly spotted a silhouette of a man that looked like it was holding a crowbar. I was unsure at the time because of my blurred vision. It looked like he was getting closer when he suddenly vanished. My heart pounded as I waited in silence. Nothing. I opened my laptop to call the police, but there wasn't any internet services available. I grabbed my lantern to go outside and check. I had to get the Wi-Fi back on. So, I clenched my fists and prepared myself to fight, just in case I had to, as I slowly opened the tent lock and the tent's zipped door. I saw nothing as I leaned towards to get a closer look. Then I finally stepped outside, but when I turned around, I saw what seemed like a dead corpse in a garbage bag hanged on a tree. It said, "You're next," written in blood on the garbage bag. When I saw that, my heart skipped a beat as I jumped into my tent, zipping shut and locking my tent door. I curled up in a ball inside of my sleeping bag, sleeping the night out. The next morning I woke up pondering what had just happened the night before. I went outside and saw that the body was no longer there. I also saw the satellite back to its original spot, which clearly wasn't there. Something was clearly wrong. But now that I have the internet again, I can call the police. I called the police, and they agreed they would come. But it would take a while, and they will arrive at midday. So then I called the park's phone number, and they hung up. Something bad was going to happen sooner or later. So I immediately got all of my stuff and packed up my tent and ran back to my car. I forgot how and where to go, so I accidentally went the wrong way when I reached the fork in the road again. When I walked up the other trail, I saw a log cabin in the distance by a lake. What's weird, I saw the same old rusty pickup truck at the gas station. I ran back the trail I was on and then headed to the right direction. I finally found the parking lot and the gates were open. But when I stepped close, the gates closed. "You thought you could escape that easily," croaked a mysterious voice out of nowhere. Then the toll booth operator suddenly appeared in my way. For years, customers have mistreated me, even though I was nice to them. "I own this park, so technically you're trespassing. And now I can finally get my revenge." Then a large clank was heard, and the toll booth operator collapsed. Behind him stood the same old man carrying the same crowbar from the gas station. "Come on, let's get you home, kid," said the old man. Before I could question it, I was already in my car with the stuff in the back trunk. "Don't worry, I'll take care of him," he said. As I drove off, I saw the old man tie up the insane toll booth operator while the sun was shining brightly. I thought the old man was the killer, but that goes to show you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Weeks have passed, and I have been informed that the toll booth operator has been sentenced to life in prison, and that the old man now owns the park, taking place of the toll booth now. I guess Christmas came early for me. I had left a residential facility where I worked as an LNA, licensed nursing assistant, the day after one of the residents I took care of passed away. Many of the residents or their wives would see me waiting for the school bus with my boys, and would wave because I only lived a few houses down from where this facility was located. One day, as I was waiting for the bus to come, I could see someone walking towards me from the facility. I ushered my boys on the bus and waved to the bus driver. I heard my name called. It was the resident's wife. She was carrying something with her. I needed to get to work, but I knew this woman and felt that I should wait around for her. I started to meet her halfway. She grabbed me and hugged me. She proceeded to thank me for everything I did for her husband and for putting up with him for so long. She thanked me for being there to talk to for so many years, but I could feel that something was wrong. She told me that he was not always the man I met. I nodded, assuming that she meant that he was not always needy or rough-speaking as many LNAs felt he was. I felt that it must have been difficult to be in the position he found himself in. She then told me that he used to paint when he first retired, and that she was able to get rid of all of his paintings, but one. I did find that odd because I would have thought she would want to keep them. However, the residents' homes are small. She wanted me to take the painting and do with it what should be done with it. Of course. Told her that it was not necessary. She looked at me oddly. She told me that she knew I could not receive items from residents when I worked there. But I no longer work there. I needed to take this painting. She was insistent. She said that I would know what to do with it. Again. Confused by her statement, I did not know what to do at that time, and finally agreed to accept it. I gave her another hug, and politely told her I needed to head to work. She seemed relieved. As she walked away, I rushed back to my home. I put the painting, which was wrapped in plain brown paper with a twine wrapped around it, against the living room closet. I figured I would open it up when I got home. I got home and started to make supper, completely forgetting about the painting. After getting everything done and the boys to bed, I saw the painting leaning against the living room closet. I decided it was time to open it. It was weird. The painting was just brown, with a small red figure in the right-hand corner. Still confused as to why she would give me a weird painting like this, I decided to hang it up. During the night, I heard a crash. I went into the living room to find the painting was off the wall and lying in the middle of the living room floor, nowhere near the wall that I hung it. Thinking that the nail fell out somehow, I checked it. Nope, the nail was fine. I checked the frame, and it was fine. I rehung it. In the morning, I found the painting on the floor again. I sighed and decided to lean it against the closet. I picked up the wrappers from the night before, and a note fell out. It was from the wife. She told me that a friend of mine, another LNA, told her that I needed to get this painting, and I would know how to dispose of it. She stated that her husband was abusive before they moved to the facility. He dabbled in things, and I might know people who could dispose of haunted paintings. The whole gifting was a misunderstanding, and I did contact someone I knew who was into haunted objects, and they gladly took it off my hands. Remember to ask more questions before receiving gifts from others, because it may not be a gift, but a need to hand off creepy items. For 7 days straight, an eerie, blood-red bus would stop in front of my house at 3:33 a.m. This seemed strange, mostly because, like the vast majority of American towns, Frost Hollow had no public transportation at all. Even stranger, People always got on and off the bus whenever it stopped. They all looked extremely tall and thin, and whenever I tried to focus on their faces, they seemed like no more than a flesh-colored blur. On the morning of the 7th day, I had called the sheriff's department to ask them about it. I had no better ideas. A woman with a thick southern accent answered the phone. "Morning. Sheriff's office. How can I help you?" she drawled. I hesitated, not even knowing where to start with this odd story. "I'm not really sure who to call about this, but there's a bus stopping in front of my house in the middle of the night, dropping people off. I live on Slaughterhouse Road, past the abandoned school. It's a little strange, because it only comes past 3 in the morning, and there are always people waiting to board it." I rambled, sweating heavily. I felt like a fool. The woman went silent for a long moment. I could hear her slight breathing on the other end of the line. "We don't have any buses going to Slaughterhouse Road, sir," she said insistently. "There are no buses in the town at all, other than for the public schools, at least not public transportation. Perhaps it's a private company. Did you see any company logo or information on the side of the bus? Any route numbers or anything? Sometimes the nursing homes or medical facilities might have private buses for elderly or disabled patients." I had been trying to avoid this subject, but now I had no choice but to reveal what I saw. Yes, on the side of the bus, it said Inferno Express, and the route number said 666. I heard only breathing on the other end of the line for a couple seconds, as if the woman were waiting for the punchline. A heartbeat later, I heard her hang up on me. I stood there listening to the whine of the dial tone, thinking and wondering. I knew I needed evidence of the mysterious night bus, and I felt determined to get it. At 3 a.m., I put on a black long-sleeve shirt, black sneakers and black jeans, trying to make myself as inconspicuous as possible. Nervously, I grabbed my digital camera and headed outside. The night felt beautiful, warm and humid with a soft breeze. I smelled the fresh summer air sweeping down the rolling hills. Trying to calm myself down, I felt as if I were going out to commit a murder rather than just trying to capture video of a random bus in my own backyard. I crept across the road, seeing the windows in my neighbor's house stood dark. The street I lived on consisted mostly of woodlands with a few scattered houses. There were plenty of good hiding spots. I knew the bus stopped in front of a patch of marshy swampland a few hundred feet down the road, right on the border of my neighbor's property. I found some large, thick bushes near the street to hide behind, making sure I was far enough away to avoid being detected while still maintaining a clear line of sight. I checked my watch, seeing the minute hand creeping toward the penultimate moment. This was my last chance to leave. I felt a rising anxiety and uncertainty, sweating heavily. I closed my eyes, waiting and listening. It seemed only seconds later that I heard the approaching rumble of a powerful engine echoing far down the road. I went into action immediately, pressing the record button. I turned the camera on myself, whispering furtively. "Hello, my name is Landon Pierce," I murmured quickly, trying to get it all out before the bus got here. "I live in Frost Hollow on Slaughterhouse Road. For the past week, a bus has been stopping in front of my house in the middle of the night, and the people on it, they don't look right. They're all extremely tall and thin, so I'm here, recording all of this. If something happens to me, if someone finds this..." I let the sentence fade off into nothing. The brakes of the bus squealed with a hellish caterwauling. I smelled exhaust and gasoline. A heartbeat later, the bus came into view, stopping only a stone's throw away from where I crouched, hiding in the thick shadows of the swampy brush. Mosquitoes constantly buzzed past my ears, landing on my neck and arms every few seconds. But I dared not move. I kept the camera steady, trying to quiet my breathing, as if the people on the bus knew exactly where I was and what I was up to. The bus gleamed with fresh, blood-red paint. The windows looked like sideways eyeballs, long dark oval panes whose shadows contrasted heavily with the bright exterior. I checked to make sure the camera was recording, satisfied to see the small red indicator light glowing brightly. I hoped that the people on the bus wouldn't see the slight glare of the screen or the red dot of the camera, if indeed they were people at all. The door at the front slid open with a shrieking of rusty metal. An interior light turned on inside the bus, glowing with a fiery radiance. All of the strange, eye-shaped windows shone with the bright scarlet illumination. It danced and strobed, sending long shadows skittering down the swamp. At the front, I saw a driver in a black suit with white buttons and high, polished boots, almost reminding me of the garb of an SS officer. He looked extremely tall, his bone-white head extending nearly to the ceiling. Two lidless, black eyes bulged from his head. Like the eyes of some monstrous praying mantis, they looked nearly the size of oranges. I gasped as he turned to look in my direction. I wondered if those enormous eyes could see the tiny red dot on my camera. To my horror, my question was answered moments later. Tall, faceless silhouettes stepped off the bus, appearing suddenly in the crimson light. I looked through the screen of the camera, zooming in to try to see any signs of eyes or mouths or noses. Yet the recording showed everything clearly enough. The smooth, featureless flesh stretching across their egg-shaped heads, their arms stretched down nearly to their feet, their fingers long and twisted like the gnarled roots of a tree. Around their bodies, I saw orange jumpsuits, like those prisoners in the area wore. Their smooth, hairless skin rippled slightly, moving in and out as if these strange creatures breathed through it. A few of these bizarre creatures entered the woods and swamps, diverging in different directions. One of them went towards a neighbor's house, creeping around the side with exaggerated, eerie steps. It glanced in the windows with its eyeless face, putting its long fingers around the sides of its head, as if it were trying to block out the glare of non-existent sunlight. It was as if these abominations had only heard about human mannerisms through word of mouth. It tiptoed forward on dull black shoes that seemed twice as long as any normal human foot. The bus stayed unmoving in front of me, its engine idling loudly, the door hanging open. I saw the driver pushing himself up off his massive chair. He slunk forwards, bowing his smooth, hairless head as he exited the threshold. Like the faceless creatures, he tiptoed forwards in an exaggerated, almost childlike manner, his bulging, black eyes glittering. He looked completely insane. He kept his arms raised, drawing the claw-like hands back and forth with every overemphasized step. I realized with mounting horror that he appeared headed in my direction. A few moments later, I was certain of it. His head ratcheted up to face me, his protuberant eyes appearing more excited and manic than before. My heart hammered in my chest as I looked around for a way out. The hairless, chalk-white face grinned with a psychotic gleam as the driver quickly pushed his way through the thick bushes at the border of the road, his gaze never faltering, his eyes never leaving mine. At that moment, a fear like I had never experienced before shot through my body. I stumbled to my feet, turning to sprint blindly into the forest, but behind me lay a fetid swamp. As soon as I took a single step, my foot sunk deeply into the earth. Brown water flooded over the moss, covering the ground in a superficial layer as it collapsed under my weight. Shit, I swore, my arms windmilling as I nearly fell forward into the rank water. But a hand shot out, grabbing me by the back of the neck and yanking me back. The hand felt burning hot, as if the flesh of the owner had an extreme case of fever. My digital camera slipped out of my hands, falling into the swampy ground with a wet thud. "Get off me!" I screamed, trying to grab at the hand holding my neck with an iron grasp. I was still facing away from the bus, but I felt myself being pulled backwards, stumbling. I tried not to fall. My foot caught on sharp rocks and roots, but the sharp fingers of the hand never loosened. It would just pull me back up to my feet, the fingers digging into my flesh with an agonizing pain. I felt small trickles of blood running down my back and the sides of my neck. As we got back to the pavement, the driver threw me down hard in front of the bus steps. I felt skin tear along my knees and elbows, sensed the many cuts and bruises I had suffered. I raised my head, slowly blinking my eyes, blearily. I looked up through the open door, seeing the enormous driver's seat sitting empty. It took me a few moments to realize what else I was seeing. But when I did, a sense of horror like a lightning strike smashed down upon me. The steps held human bones. Arm and leg bones placed side by side covered the entire surface of the stairs. Many looked yellowed and cracked with age, but others seemed far fresher, the bones smoother and whiter. The driver's chair was even more horrifying. Hundreds of grinning human skulls composed the guts of the chair. Rising up to the ceiling, human skin covered the front and seat, pale and leathery. Countless human teeth stuck out of the skin, their roots embedded in the supple flesh. The teeth rose up to the top of the bus in crisscrossing diagonal patterns. I glanced back at the driver, seeing his thin body looming over me. One inhumanly long arm pointed at the open door of the bus. It reminded me of the Grim Reaper showing the way forwards to the recently dead. He stood without speaking. His eyes glittered with insanity, and he had a rictus grin plastered across his smooth, white face. "No, I don't want to," I pleaded. "Don't make me get on it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should never have come out here." The driver stayed as still as a corpse with a face like a grinning death mask. I saw movement behind him. Realizing too tall, faceless humanoids had appeared in bright jumpsuits to board the bus. They came up besides the driver, their blurry heads bowing down to look at me. If indeed, they could see at all without eyes, I wasn't sure whether these creatures were just mimicking human gestures and movements or not. Without warning, the two humanoids scuttled forwards, their rail-thin arms reaching out to me. I tried to crawl away, but moments later, I felt them wrap my wrists. Their skin felt burning hot and feverish. They lifted me up. I tried screaming, to call for help from my neighbors, but no help would arrive. They pushed me through the door into the fiery red light beyond. In every seat, I saw tall, emaciated people with smooth faces. The skin rippled and distorted when I tried to look at their heads. The two creatures holding me forced me toward the back. There, a boy of about 10 or 11 Saturday, looking terrified and alone. They threw me into the seat, turning and walking away immediately after. From the front of the bus, I heard the door slowly closing with a squeal of rusted joints. The driver was back in his seat. I looked up, seeing him staring into the rearview mirror at me. "How'd you get here?" the boy asked in a small, quavering voice. I turned to look at him in wonder. His pale skin heavily contrasted with his dark eyes and black hair. With his high cheekbones, he had a slightly vampiric look. I don't know. I was kidnapped." "What's going on?" "Kid, who are these people? Where are they taking us?" I whispered, constantly looking up to see if we were being watched. Yet the faceless humanoids stayed still in their seats. Their blurry heads pointed straight ahead, totally frownsome and unmoving. Only the driver showed any signs of life as he put the bus in drive and slowly pulled forward. "They're taking us to the playpen. They showed it to me in my dreams," he said. "I used to see these people looking in my window at night. People without faces who looked really tall and skinny. I told my parents about it, but they thought I was just having nightmares. But when I fell asleep, they showed me everything." "Okay, so what is it? What did you see?" I asked. His face went pale. He just shook his head. "I don't think you really want to know," he answered. "Both of us will be there soon enough, and then you'll see for yourself." I found out the boy's name was Ian, and I told him mine was Landon. He said he was from the other end of Frost Hollow, and that he had been on the bus for days without food or water. "It circles around to different towns," Ian whispered. I looked out the window, seeing a dark desert all around us. Sand dunes swirled on both sides of an endless highway. I hadn't noticed when the world outside had shifted from forest to desert. Those things without faces, they come in people's houses, get inside their head and their dreams. They make you think horrible things. They used to scream at me that I needed to kill myself, to hang myself or slit my wrists. I call them the skulkers. "That's a good name for them," I said listlessly, still staring out the window at the shadowy, endless dunes. "We're not getting out of this, are we, Ian? I mean alive." "Probably not," he said, his voice hopeless and dead. On the horizon of the dead, dark desert, a black monolith rose high in the air. In general shape, it looked like a lighthouse, but it had no windows, and its outer walls looked like polished obsidian or onyx. It appeared to rise hundreds of stories into the cloudless sky. The bus started slowing down. The crimson lights lit up overhead. I looked forward, realizing that all the skulkers had turned their blurry heads now to stare straight back at me and Ian. The driver, too, continuously looked at us through the rearview mirror as the bus came to a stop. Now arriving, the playpen. A robotic female voice intoned calmly through speakers built into the walls. The door at the front flew open. Except for the idling of the engine, everything had gone deathly silent. "I think they want us to get out," Ian whispered nervously, slowly getting to his feet. I wanted to say no, to fight back, but with dozens of faceless stalkers staring at us in their eerie, frownsing poses, my courage failed me. On unsteady legs, I got to my feet and followed Ian down the walkway. The faces of the stalkers turned to follow us, seeming to blur and ripple faster with excitement. I wondered what would happen once we got outside. But, in reality, I had no inkling of the horrors ahead. As I stepped down onto the inky pavement of the street, I realized that this desert felt freezing cold. Wind swept across the dunes at a tremendous speed. Clouds of dark sand obscured the black sky. The bus door stayed open, all of its passengers watching us with interest. The driver, too, never took his eyes off of me and Ian. I wanted to get far away from these creepy stalkers. "Let's go," I said over the roaring winds. Putting a hand on Ian's shoulder, he flinched away, looking small and scared. Side by side, we started walking down the road. It wasn't long before we found our first body. A mummified corpse lay on the side of the street, its dried flesh sticking tightly to the bone. Its eyeless sockets stared straight up. Its open mouth looked like it was frozen in a silent scream, a black hole filled with sand. Ian gave a strangled cry as he saw it, falling back. "Hey, buddy." "It's okay," I said. "It's just a dead body." He shook his head, pointing vigorously at the desiccated corpse. I followed the line of his finger, realizing something odd was happening. The corpse had begun to shake and rattle, its splayed-out limbs jumping up and down, the ragged strands of cloth still covering its chest and legs, ripped apart with a soft tearing sound. Wet, black tentacles covered in dozens of eyes rose up, snapping apart the remaining bones and flesh with ease. As the ribs jutted up like spikes, something hellish slithered out. It rolled on its tentacles, a ball of slithering limbs covered in something slick and shiny. Though the size of a small dog, as it splayed out, its width and height doubled. It had no head or central mass, but its many eyes constantly blinked in chaotic and random patterns. The eyes looked blue and very human, bloodshot and dilated with fury. "Get away from it." Ian screamed with a terror I had never heard in a child's voice before. He ripped at my arm, pulling me back. I stumbled, nearly falling. The tentacled creature slithered towards us at an incredible speed. Its many eyes focused ahead, insane and furious. As we turned, I glimpsed stalkers watching us from the sides of the street. Their blurred faces stayed hidden in the sandstorms blowing past. But I saw their tall, inhuman silhouettes in the darkness. They reminded me of spectators watching gladiators dying in the Colosseum. "What is it?" I shrieked over the roaring winds. "What happens if it catches us?" Ian was breathless with terror, sprinting ahead of me. He was a very fast kid. "Don't let it catch you," he screamed back. I realized the monolith stood ahead of us only a few hundred feet. A powerful current of hope surged through my heart as I saw a massive threshold filled with white light. But as I got to within a stone's throw away, I felt something warm and slick close around my ankle. I screamed as I fell forward, seeing Ian disappearing through the doorway, his silhouette sharp and clear for a moment, before the white light swallowed him up like a hungry mouth. "God damn it. Help me!" I cried, crawling towards the white light. I kicked and struggled against the tentacles wrapping around my leg with a grip like squeezing metal bands. I dragged my hands through the sand as I felt myself pulled back, my head smacking hard against the pavement underneath. Stars danced in front of my vision. In the gloom and darkness, swimming against unconsciousness, I glimpsed more of the stalkers, always watching from a far distance, their flesh seeming to ripple with excitement at the prospect of witnessing imminent death and dismemberment. As more tentacles wrapped around my waist, I looked back, only inches away, furious. Dilated eyes stared back. The tendril shot towards my mouth as others held my head in place. I didn't know what it would do once it got inside me, but I knew instinctively it would be something horrible. I heard a hoarse shout, felt something smash into the creature on my chest. I felt the tentacles suddenly retract from my face and head, the eyes turning to look at whatever new threat had arrived. A thin man with a long beard and haunted eyes stood above me, holding a homemade stone club. It looked like it had been whittled from sandstone, the end formed into a jagged point. The tentacled creature hissed like a snake as the man bashed it again. Finally, mercifully, it released me. I rolled away, coughing and sputtering. "Run, you idiot!" the man cried, smashing the creature through one of its many eyes with the sharp point at the end. The eye exploded in a shower of black blood and vitreous fluid. The creature's hissing escalated into a distorted wail that split and echoed like hundreds of voices screaming at once. I didn't need more encouragement than that. Shell-shocked and terrified, I scrambled to my feet, sprinting the last few steps towards the threshold. I looked back to see the man running behind me, the tentacled creature hissing and gurgling as it pursued. Together, we fell through the doorway of white light. As soon as we crossed the threshold, the creature stopped, its eyes furiously blinking and glaring. A few heartbeats later, it rolled away, its silhouette disappearing into the shadowy dunes outside. "Well, that star spawn almost got you," the man whispered, clapping me on the shoulder. "Good thing I was coming back this way. I went out hunting." He showed me a dead rattlesnake slung around his back. "I'm Teddy, by the way." He reached out his hand to me, but I only stared at it. He let it drop after a moment. "Star spawn?" I asked. He nodded eagerly, his brown eyes gleaming. He looked extremely thin and malnourished, and the clothes he wore were frayed and falling apart. I wondered how long he had been trapped here. "That's what we call them." "Yeah," Teddy answered. "They come off the black god. Parts of his body sometimes fall off when he's sleeping, little parts here and there, but they regrow into those things. The star spawn. If they get their tentacle down your throat, it's game over, buddy. A little piece of them breaks off and starts growing in your stomach, eating away at your organs and muscle until it decides to break through. It's not a fast death, either. You might be in excruciating pain for weeks before it kills you." I looked around the room in the black tower where we stood. A massive chamber with gleaming obsidian walls surrounded us, extending up dozens of feet to a flat, black ceiling. There, a bright spotlight pointed down at us, illuminating the room in white light. Stairs made of the same stone spiraled up the outer perimeter of the circular room, disappearing into a gap in the ceiling. "My friend came through here," I asked. "Do you know where he is?" Teddy shook his head. "What's your friend's name?" "Stranger?" he asked. I laughed uncertainly, then introduced myself. "Well, he's got to be upstairs with the other one." "The other one?" I asked. Teddy nodded. "We're not the only refugees here." "Landon," he answered. "The bus brings more victims all the time, from all over the world. A lot of them don't last long. The star spawn often get them, and if they don't, the stalkers hunt them down and torture them to death. I've seen a lot of bodies skinned alive, people who got caught by the stalkers." "Well, let's go see them," I said. "I want to make sure he's okay. He's just a boy, you know." Teddy looked at me grimly. "He's not the only child who's been brought to this place," he answered. "I've seen more corpses of children here than you could possibly know." I walked up the stairs with Teddy at my heels, rising through the gap in the ceiling. Here, there was an even larger chamber, rising up thousands of feet into the air. Towards the top of it, I saw something massive and black with thousands of tentacles. It stuck to the flat ceiling, slick and wet, the countless enormous eyelids on its limbs tightly closed in sleep. Drops of slime occasionally fell down from the creature's body, landing on the floor with soft patterings. I saw an old woman sitting next to a small fire with Ian by her side. She had a rattlesnake on a spit and was cooking it. Ian had a leather satchel of water in his hands, which he drank from thirstily before passing it back to her. I remember him saying he had been trapped on the bus for days, and I wondered if he had any food or water that whole time. I walked forwards, waving and smiling, feeling much more hopeful seeing Ian alive and well. I glanced nervously up at the tentacled monstrosity, uncertain of whether I should be afraid or not. "The black god sleeps above us," the old woman whispered. "Do not wake him. We must escape before he awakes," Teddy said furtively, putting a calloused hand on my shoulder. "We are going to try to hijack the bus. It is the only way between worlds. If we stay here, we will all certainly die, including the boy. It's only a matter of time. But if we can kill the driver..." "Oh, what about all the stalkers?" I asked. "It's not just the driver. Whatever is on the bus, the black god is far worse," the man whispered. "His sleep becomes more troubled as time passes. We see his tentacles twisting with his nightmares. Once he awakens, those nightmares will spread throughout the playpen. Right now, we are only hunted by the star spawn and the stalkers." "I met an old man who saw the black god awaken," the old woman said. "When I got here, he was still alive. Every few months, the black god comes alive to feed, and he said that the corpses walk when that happens. The dead scream and the sky rips apart, and everything moving gets hunted down like vermin to be absorbed into the black god's flesh. where they live for weeks being slowly digested and driven insane by the pain. So how did he survive? I asked. She shrugged. He said he hid in the bus. The driver gets out sometimes to hunt, and he snuck in. The black god missed him, but he was the only one. I found out the old woman's name was Jackie, like Teddy. She wanted to get out of the playpen immediately. The stalkers and star spawn won't come in here, she said. They're afraid of the black god, and rightly so, Teddy muttered. It's suicidal to be in here. That thing could wake up at any minute, and we'll be the first ones sucked into hell if it does. I've heard the screams of people being eaten by the black god's flesh, and it sounds like they're being burned alive. They went on for weeks, months. Stop it, Jackie insisted. You're scaring the boy. I looked over at Ian. Seeing she was right, he looked ready to pass out, his skin turning chalk white. Jackie pulled the roasted rattlesnake off the spit, ripping it apart with her hands and handing pieces of it to Ian and Teddy. She looked at me, her wrinkled face cocked. Do you want a piece? I shook my head, feeling slightly nauseous just looking at the dead, burnt snake. Its head was still attached to the body, its open eyes blackened and staring. So what's the plan here? I asked. How do we get back? Teddy looked at me, chewing a mouthful of rattlesnake. He lifted his homemade sandstone club, then nodded past Jackie. I followed his line of sight, seeing a few more primitive truncheons. That's it? We're going to bludgeon the driver and all the stalkers and steal the bus. Teddy nodded. You have a better idea? He answered. In truth, I did not. The four of us went back out of the stone monolith that held the black god, seeing the endless paved road disappearing into the horizon, armed with the primitive stone truncheons. We walked side by side, constantly scanning the darkness for enemies. There are bodies everywhere, Teddy said over the roar of the wind. Most of them have star spawn hiding inside. I wondered how often the bus came this way, but at that moment, chaos broke out. I saw the star spawn with one punctured eye rolling furiously down the pavement. I pointed, screaming. When something ran into me from the side, I fell hard into Ian, knocking both of us down. We went sprawling in the sand as two stalkers stood overhead, their insane faces blurring and jerking from side to side as arms as long as a human twisted toward me. Sharp fingers jabbed down at my face, and in a blinding moment of absolute panic and agony, I felt them puncture my left eye. I screamed, jerking back as they ripped and crumpled my eye. I felt it explode with a powerful jet of blood and vitreous fluid. My vision went white with agony. At that moment, I saw headlights through the haze of pain and terror. In my shell-shocked state, I barely realized it was the bus speeding down the road. The small star spawn hissed with animal hunger before a tire ran over it, causing black blood to explode from it like a water balloon filled with sludge. Teddy came behind the stalker, bringing his heavy stone club down on the back of its head. I heard a wet crack of bone as it fell limply on top of me, its fingers still clutching my dismembered eye. I realized the optic nerve and blood vessels were still attached, running along a few inches from the mutilated socket. I pushed myself to my feet with a rush of adrenaline, feeling the vessels rip apart like snapping string. I nearly passed out, but Ian and Teddy came to my sides, each putting a steadying hand around my back. The bus stopped in front of us, the door shrieking open. As the first of the stalkers descended the step, I heard a primal screaming from behind us, from the direction of the monolith. I looked back in terror, seeing the top of it explode in a shower of volcanic stone as massive tentacles hundreds of feet long reached blindly out. Like a colossus sitting atop the world, its many gigantic eyes glared down balefully. It's starting, Teddy screamed. We need to get on that bus now. Staggering, I watched the three of them run forwards. I followed behind, feeling weak and sick. With my one remaining eye, I saw the driver descending the stairs. His black eyes bulged as he stared up at the sky. I realized with horror that the clouds had started to rain fire. The flickering flames lit up the world as the black god roared with a primal scream. Teddy ran forward, raising the club to strike at the driver. Casually, almost lazily, the driver raised one hand, grabbing Teddy by the neck and lifting him off the ground. His sharp fingers stabbed into the skin and flesh, digging deeply as Teddy gurgled. He weakly brought the club down as the driver threw his broken body to the side of the road. Teddy twitched, suffocating on his own blood and seizing. I watched his eyes roll back in his head. Jackie and Ian ran at the driver together, closing in on him from both sides. Ian struck at the long, emaciated leg under the black suit. The driver slashed at Jackie's face as bone cracked under the weight of Ian's blow. The driver buckled as his leg gave way, his furious, lidless eyes ratcheting towards Ian. As he fell, he reached forward, dragging the boy down with him. I saw Jackie on the ground next to them with deep stab wounds eating through her eyes and into her brain. Blood spurted from her still body. I stumbled forward, raising the club and bringing it down on the back of the driver's head. His head collapsed as he clawed and stabbed at Ian's face and neck, opening up his throat in an instant. I heard gurgling and weak cries as I jumped onto the bus. Sickened by all the blood and death, I ran up the steps, never looking back. Bleeding heavily, my vision turning white with pain, I started the bus. The engine turned on immediately, rumbling and powerful. I had never heard such a sweet sound in all my life. I began driving ahead, down the freezing dark streets of the playpen. I felt my hands sticking to the steering wheel, my skin covered in gore and clotted blood. I glanced in the rearview mirror and had to repress an urge to scream. Every seat was filled with stalkers, their blurring faces looking straight ahead, their long, mannequin-like bodies twisted and jerked. Like one single hive mind, they rose. Up ahead, the dark street disappeared into a spiraling vortex the color of fresh blood. I accelerated, pushing the bus as fast as it would go, afraid to look back, to see what the stalkers would do. I drove through the vortex, pushing the bus up to 70 and 80 miles an hour. The blinding torrents of crimson light dissolved to reveal my street, Slaughterhouse Road. I slammed on the brakes, glancing back to see a stalker only inches behind me, its twisted fingers reaching out to grab me. Their heads jerked from side to side, blurring and jumping. Their arms seemed to vibrate with seizure-like movements. I heard a cry like one voice, a sound of anticipation and bloodlust. I opened the door and fell out of the bus as sharp fingers clawed at my head and scalp. Fresh blood ran down my face as I crawled across the pavement, screaming and crying. Thankfully, one of my neighbors heard me and came out, shining a flashlight in my bloody, mutilated face. Soon after, I lost consciousness. I remember waking up in the hospital, but my nightmares were always of Playpen and the Black God, and I think they always will be. The engine revved, and the tricycle soon sputtered into the distance. The Celeste gate was painted on, sparrows in flight. Pauline's work. I looked between the pickets to find two people giggling. A guy was showing something on his phone to a gal. Midges hovered in a cloud around a pillar lamp. The night air was extra crisp. I stepped into the light. Ayo. Tapping on a digital keyboard. A dude with a pompadour looked up from his phone. Hi, Basti, he said in a high-pitched nasal. Oh my God, I love the tap-out shirt. Wax was the rangy guy who played volleyball. I remember doing kata a few meters from the university's outdoor court. He spiked so hard, the ball cleared the net and careened towards me. Good thing I was slick and slipped from the line of fire. Wax ran off, as he should have. A choppy, underwater-sounding voice garbled from the phone. Wax giggled sweet nothings on cam. I went to sit on the porch rail near the door. The door swung open. On instinct, I leapt backwards into a stance. A woman leaned against the jamb. She raised an eyebrow. I relaxed and cleared my throat. Then, the cherub-faced Chinita would have looked angelic if she wasn't deadpanned all the time. Ven's cheeks jiggled as she shook her head. Where is everybody? Anyway, I asked. Joe and the others are still looking for a butcher's. Pao squeezed past Ven. For the barbecue. At 8:45. I told you we should have done groceries right after the exam. What about the juice? Let's wait for everyone to arrive, so we can chip in. Out my wallet came a pair of yellow-faced taquinos. Guess who won a Kyokushin match and is about to make poor financial decisions? Oh, wow. Congratulations. There isn't shit to do here, so I'll look for a store, you know, secure the juice. Wait a minute. Tough guy. There's been a series of muggings around here lately. Nice of you to be worried about them. Strength in numbers. FaceTime your boyfriend later. Wax. And don't act like you've got something better to do. Ven. Ven had chains down her ripped jeans and was rocking Doc Martens. Knowing her, they were probably steel-toed. Her oversized hoodie looked especially Koani. I'm no wimp. But I didn't mind having Buenaventura around. Despite the surname, she's Hokkien on her mom's side. Picked up Sanda and divided by, or Choi Li Foot, some kung fu or another, from an uncle in the mainland. Muggers. Huh, Ven said. Shame I left my dadao at the dorm. Say, Pao, wasn't there a bolo in your kitchen? Absolutely. Not. Hey, Bass, can you pick up Chan on the way? She lives right down the road. Refuses to go out by herself after sundown, with all the stuff going on. She'll show you around the neighborhood. How about you? Sis, Wax asked. Sure you'll be fine on your own? Dad left me the key to his safe before leaving. That's where he keeps his 38. Oh shit, my eyes almost popped out. Then, I made everyone leave their phones. Having those around was asking for trouble. I shined the way using a tactical flashlight. Jagged around the lens. We got to Chan's and spent 5 minutes outside their gate calling for her. Finally, a sensor light on the front porch went on. A woman in a turtleneck and rectangular glasses stumbled out the door. She trudged towards us, adjusting her satchel. Where were you? Sis, we were starting to think you died or something. Wax laughed. Took a power nap. Chan's inverted bob cut swayed as she shut the gate behind her. Speak for yourselves, I said. I was starting to think the whole won't go out after sundown shtick was a false alibi, so nobody figures out that it's Chan sticking people up. Sure, boss. 'Cause the amount of headshots you've taken will surely convince a jury. Chan led the way. All the stores on her block were dry, so we rounded the corner to the next. Fixed to the interior of a wrought iron fence was a box made of plywood and corrugated roofing. Making up the facade, a section of pony wall mounted with rusty bars, a mesh screen behind them. 2 of the pickets were bent apart. Don't know if it was intentional or not. A welded hatch between them prevented anyone from squeezing in. Rigged next to it was a bicycle bell. Rows of shelves and a beat-up fridge stood behind an equally beat-up desk. Chan scanned the shelved products while I hit the bell. I rang a triplet. They sell Tang? Chan squinted. What kind? Tang inamo. She was about to yell at me when an overweight lady in a duster went into the store. I was going to ask for juice. The spiritual kind. Pepsi. Please. Ven paid for the bottle and practically deep-throated the thing. You got Red Horse? I said. They did not. Place was dry. Chan suggested we backtrack. Follow the street out of the neighborhood and walk along the highway to a mini-mart. Ven said she's buying juice. Like, actual drink mix. Chan tells her to buy them at the other place. It's cheaper here. 1 sachet of Tang. Just as the storekeeper turned to get some powdered juice off the shelf, Ven secreted the bottle into her hoodie. Everyone else saw the sleight of hand, though. I went up to her and asked, "What are you doing?" She burped my face and jerked her head sideways. I turned to where she pointed. Yawa. 3 sleazies were hanging around a streetlight. We idled, deliberating what to do next. Chan explained that this street led to a cul-de-sac. No other way out, except the one we came. Fucked around for 10 minutes. They were still there. I wonder whose idea it was to leave our phones behind. I rang for the storekeeper again, hoping she'd place a call for us. Out of the house, into the store. Wax gave her Pauline's number, but she didn't answer. Jesus Christ, was she taking a shit? The plan was for Pao to have someone pick us up, with folks being on Messenger. Nobody had anyone else's number. We figured the storekeeper would be worried that we'd run off with her phone. Probably wouldn't lend it to us. No point calling the cops. Pigs were too busy oinking after some motorbike with an expired registration plate. In the end, we took the chance that they were just a few unsavory-looking locals. With their dirty wife beaters and crumbling Marlboros, they just happened to really like that one street lamp. Besides, me and Ven would body all 3 of them on our own. There was only the dim moonlight to barely silhouette us. Cutting through the murky blackness was the shine of my flashlight. Apparently, the genius in charge of urban planning thought the best place to put street lamps was wherever he felt like it. Halfway towards the bend, I glanced behind me to see if the creeps actually followed us. They did. And then some. Around a dozen figures now stalked us in a loose mob. No idea where these assholes materialized from, but I knew they weren't pedestrians who just happened upon us. Ven drifted over to me. If anything happens, we book it. Saw those squammies chain smoking earlier? No chance any of them will catch up to us if we bolt. 0. But there's 12 of them now. The odds someone gains on us. It's quadrupled. 4 times 0 is still 0. What I'm getting at is this. If shit goes down, these hands come flying. I don't plan on beating everyone up, but I'll at least stall them while you run off. Shit. I'll back you up. You'll need it. I switched my light to the brightest setting and shuffled leftwards. She took the right. Me and Ven started to lag some. I took another peek. The lamppost trio were coming at me in single file. Amateur hour. Footsteps power walked towards me. My shoulder got yanked. It's go time. I let the force on my shoulders spin me into a hammer fist, thrown with the opposite hand, the one holding the flashlight. The first guy was nailed with the toothed bezel, right in the temple. With 1K lumen straight to the eyes and a slick 1-2, the remaining 2 went to sleep. 3 o'clock. Hard Rock Cafe, Kuala Lumpur. Immediately turned right. I was caught up in the moment to register that it was Chan who shouted. Dude in a Hard Rock Cafe shirt was flipping open a bally song. He started swatting the air when I dazzled him a meter away. Glue sniffer ate asphalt like it was unla rice at a Mang Inasal. He never saw what hit him. I did. It was a 1-2 OUNCE bottle of Pepsi. Flew straight towards him. Its heel caught him in the hairline. I checked my surroundings in case another hijo de puta still wanted a beating, including the ones Ven dropped. 7 dudes dozed on the blacktop. The rest fucked off in the opposite direction. Let's go. Chan took my hand and pulled me running down the bend. Next. We knew we were panting like dogs. I thought it was just adrenaline that got my heart pumping. Fucked my sense of time too. But it felt like we took longer than we should have. 5 minutes to saunter down the store from Pow's. Yet we were catching our breaths as if we ran for half an hour. Don't know if it was just me, but I don't think we passed the bird gate. Got complacent, running down a straight line. No one bothered to check where we were going. We just ran. What the fuck were you thinking? I said. Doubled over. We socked those losers to buy you guys. Where are we? Chan said. I stood straight and looked around. Didn't pass here when I commuted to Pow's. We were in the middle of a 4-way intersection that ran through several houses. It was barely big enough to let a tricycle drive through. Spanish colonial houses formed the whole block. They wouldn't have been out of place in Intramuros, were they not so decrepit. Weathered stone made up the ground stories. Rotten wood made up the garrisons. Creepers sprawled up the unlit houses. A couple of shingles were inches away from skidding down their gable roofs. It looked like someone was playing Sim City and dumped a few 19th century houses in a regular neighborhood. Plastered concrete walls surrounded the houses, topped with shards of glass and heavily graffitied. Bolted onto one section was a basketball hoop improvised from rebar. Cars parked under electric street lamps. Garbage heaps on the asphalt. Protruding from one of them was a 204, stuck out like the femur of some mangled roadkill. Shouldn't you know where we are? I asked Chan. This isn't part of the neighborhood. Maybe it's an adjacent one? Wax asked. Like Masagasig or Felicidad? I've passed there enough times to know what they don't look like. If they looked remotely like this, I would remember. Classy place, Ven said. Patch it up some and you've got a decent tourist trap. Surprised we've never heard of this joint. We held off asking for directions, except for that one cul-de-sac. Chan said all the roads here led back to the highway. Might even come across a tricycle on the way. We picked a random direction and walked beside a section of the wall. The row of street lamps ended. The moon was gone, probably hidden behind clouds. There was a gap of darkness between us and a speck of light in the distance. I nearly jumped when I turned on my flashlight. Shit! Faces covered almost every inch of the wall. Posters. Some prankster had painted red over their eyes. This can't be right. Chan examined them. It's a small town. If just one person went missing, everyone would hear about it. Whatever. Let's keep going. You scared? Bas. It's getting late. We'll miss the barbecue. The streetlights soon came into view. We walked until I stopped in my tracks. We didn't walk in a circle, did we? Same colonial houses, same basketball hoop, same trash heap. Could be a housing project, ᴏᴜ said, with historical buildings. Chan took a handkerchief out of her back pocket. It had a beckoning cat on it. She walked under the hoop and threw it over top. It fluttered down and draped over the rebar, the cat facing us. The fabric was probably just discolored with age. Still, those eyes looked jaundiced. Chan told us to get a move on. We went east. Ended up at a similar-looking juncture. Chan had gone pale as she stared at something. I turned where she was looking. Yawa. We walked in a straight line, but there it was, glaring with jaundiced eyes, a maneki neko. It's Encanto leading us astray, ᴏᴜ said. Encanto's live in the boonies, Chain said. Just figured out what's wrong with this place, Ven said. Hong Sui's off. Guys, I said, you seeing this? I pointed to a large tree towering above a shard-lined wall. The leaves were blowing like there was a gust of wind, but there wasn't. That's it. Then Power walked to the garbage. She rummaged with her foot until she found a crumbling sheet of yellow paper. Folding it into 4, Ven asked Chan if she had red lipstick on her. Chan pulled a stick out of her satchel. She scrawled on the paper using the lipstick and blew it dry. Finally, she chanted in Hokkien, gave each of us a piece as she divided it neatly. I checked mine before stuffing it in my pocket. Had some Chinese characters on it. Nothing left to do but ask the locals. Aside from directions, they might also have an explanation for whatever anomalies we thought just happened. I approached one of the pads. Just me, the rest keeping a couple of feet back. Wouldn't want the homeowner to get spooked by a bunch of randos late at night. I called out. Nobody answered. Took a minute or two before I turned and suggested trying another house. Chan jerked her head up. Wheeling around, I barely caught a second-story window slide shut. We are definitely bothering them, ᴏᴜ said. We turned to leave. Then the creak of the door tipped me off. That and a split second of really bad vibes. Barely dodged the knife. I moved out of the way, and it went skidding across the pavement. Oi, gagu. I grabbed the knife. I stomped towards the porch, planning to wave the blade in the fucker's face. Give him a taste of his own medicine. Got a couple of steps from the front door and I frowned. There was a presence radiating from behind the door. Then had to pull me away. ᴏᴜ was wailing about how that was illegal as we ran to another house for help. Something on the second floor made us stop. It took a second, but I realized what that faint outline in the red was. It was a humanoid thing, vague in the glowing red of its eyes. Look, ᴏᴜ screamed. Red-eyed folks were closing in from all sides of the junction. Their stare shone like headlamps. I took Chan's hand. Since she was the one nearest to me, we ran down fuck knows where before we came up a wall. After helping her up, I scaled the wall myself. We dropped into a courtyard. The opposite wall was too high to climb and topped with barbed wire and broken glass. Approaching footsteps made us reconsider going back the way we came. ᴏᴜ and Ven got separated at some point. We've got to hide, Chan said. Place looked like it had been a scrapyard since the 1800s. A steampunk-looking boiler was surrounded by trashed mid-century turntables, Walkman, flat screens, and the like. I pulled Chan to a multicab parked in a corner. The moonlight could barely illuminate how rusty and overgrown it was. We went up to it and found the driver's seat dimly outlined. But the passenger's seat was merely a void, removed for whatever reason. Chan climbed in first, picked up a tire iron near the front wheel before going in after her. She squeezed under the glove box while I sat facing the driver's seat window. The passenger's side was against a wall. If the red-eyed fuckers found us, I'll make my last stand here. There was a sheet of tarpaulin on the driver's seat, which I covered us with. I thought about joking that this is our last chance to confess our feelings towards each other, to ease the tension. But something was shuffling outside. It came closer. Closer. My fists went pale around the iron. The tarpaulin crinkled against inhuman fingertips. It's go time, but I couldn't move. Shit, it's gonna get me in Chan. The footsteps went away, disappeared into the distance. We waited. My asshole was clenched tighter than my fists. Hers too, probably. We waited. Until, by some miracle, we fell asleep. He's coming to, The first I saw was a pudgy Morena bitch, Joe. Me and Chan were lying in a king-size bed. The door was open to Pow's kitchen. Joe said she was on her motorbike when she found us unconscious on the asphalt. You look like shit, Joe said. Got into a fight, but we KO'd them. Not the other way around. Me and Ven. Speaking of, Pow and the others are looking for her. Wax too. You've got dirt on you. Chan sat up. You're one to talk, I said. She reached into her front pocket. Hey, yo, Chan went white. Have you seen my handkerchief? Nope. Why?